Because the way people talk about, again, the way people talk about transparency is they're giving one another, this is just my fully formed self and I'm sharing it with you and do what you will, as if it doesn't affect the person. But really what you're doing is opening them to your process, which is live and dynamic, and now you're in it. It's more like you're not handing them an inanimate object per se that's not dynamic. You're opening them to like a river that's running. You are more like a river that's running, and you just kind of like open the dam per se and washed over them with your life.
The etheric body, right?
Which can overwhelm them. So it's more like humans when they speak to one another, it's not that we're really just exchanging data. It's like we're opening up a valve. And if we're not careful, we can wash one another away. The problem with overly exposing people to processes too carelessly is they may not be ready for it, they might not be able to follow you, they might be overwhelmed, it may interrupt on their processes.
No, 100%. Another thing too is that it's complexified by technologies, because there would be natural limitations on how much time overlap you have with individuals, given many things, the logistical circumstances, da-di-da-di-da, and you would just literally not be able to communicate certain things over other things.
Like, if you never have if you never have solitude, and thus veiling, per se, then you're not going to be able to handle people's processes. This is the rub. Like, how do you if people open up and let you into their processes, their river, how do you stand in it? Precisely the spirits of solitude. That's why it's a dialectic, right? Like, you can experience people's processes if you've experienced times where you've developed yourself, where you've thought things through, where you're able to handle it, right? But if everything is transparency, then you never develop the capacities needed to handle the rivers that people open up, the processes that people open up on one another. Many of the most important things in life, you're not ready before there are certain experiences you've had. And actually, to make them transparent before those experiences may ruin your capacity for the experiences, or you may not go seek the experiences, right? Like, if people made overly transparent to you something like marriage is hard, then you may not get married. That's an example where when you're speaking to younger generations, you have to be wise on what you say, but at the same time, if you act like marriage isn't hard too much, then they'll feel tricked. So you have to discern the right amount of exposure, the right amount of truth, the right amount of emphasis, the right kind of wording, all of these different things. God wants to be in a relationship with you, but if he is, you might die. So how do you do that? Well, it has to be a story of unveiling, a process of unveiling, and it's not easy. And simply to say God needs to be transparent, well, then you'll die. And it's actually no different with human beings. We cannot be transparent to one another. One, because we hardly know ourselves. We're divided selves. All we can do is open up our processes. And that's quite a thing. And if we're going to do that, we need to be able to handle it and do it wisely. And then it needs to be with people who are able to enter that process. The unveiling happens in the process of dialogos. But here's the problem: if you don't have dialogos, well, then you can't do that, and so it becomes a mess.
I was thinking about this example of, I don't know why it's coming to mind suddenly, but I was thinking about being way back in like middle school and in youth group, and I had somebody I knew at youth group who was clearly going through some things, or their family was going through some things, but I never knew what was going on. And I remember feeling, well, there's a twofold thing here. One, this person was not, how do I put this? They were participating in maybe what is a potential extreme fault or ditch on the side of the introversion.
Sure.
Where sometimes you don't use words and you don't talk about it, but your body language is like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. Like they're just upset. They're not talking at all. They're not being responsive. They're not really being, like, they just look sad.
Yeah.
And, it's really hard to make them laugh or whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. This is back in middle school.
Sure.
But, so in a way, they wouldn't tell, like, they seemed very selective about who they might possibly open up to And there was this kind of, and definitely at that point in being a middle schooler, I'd be like, why doesn't she tell me? You know, why won't she talk to me? And I don't understand. And, you know, but she was also kind of going around making sure you knew something. In a sense, I'm not sure. Maybe she wasn't. I'm sure it was just a hard situation. And, you know, she maybe didn't have much thought behind the fact that, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, like, go around to these things feeling, like, looking as if I'm sad, but not
Jesus
telling
speaks about that.
what I'm going through.
I mean, Jesus speaks about that. If you're fasting, don't go declaring, like, hide things. Like, Jesus, well, this is...
Hiding, but hiding isn't merely not talking about it.
Yeah, your body...
You also have to, like, you actually
act like,
which seems like you're pretending or something.
Yes.
But that's where we talk about also the pretending as something that can actually be a cultivation
But
the point is, like, if you're going to be kind of selective or not share what is going on in your world because it might be too difficult, it's not the right timing, blah 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 blah. You shouldn't also use it though as a weapon.
Yes.
It can be. I'm not saying this person did this. Honestly, like, I totally understand. It was probably a very difficult situation, and I don't understand. It was middle school.
Yes.
But you also don't want to use the silence,
correct,
like it's speaking, because this person
that's still transparency. Actually,
this person was speaking exactly. It's a type of transparency of, oh my gosh, their body language is talking so loudly, and yet they're not saying anything except to maybe this one person who they seem to confide in, but now that's a secret, and all these sort of weird, strange, probably middle school dynamics.
Well, you see that happen in couples. I mean, where there's, I'm not, the man, notably, can keep silent, but it's obvious in how they act and their tone and their way of speaking. They're not actually veiling. They're actually very transparent that they're pissed off. Like, transparency is not just...
too. I mean, it's like the silent treatment.
Yeah, like transparency is not simply a matter of speaking.
Exactly. It's literally like a mode of how you exhibit, a mode of how you, again, like we said, handle in the quiet, in the solitude. How do you wrestle with that stuff so that when you present yourself to others, you're not going to put it on them, unless you decide I discern that it's wise for me to bring this to this person for counsel or for whatever. Yes,
it's not merely about speaking.
Yeah.
You can't be going around looking angry or upset and then say, well, I'm bearing this, for different things, because you're maybe to some degree. And there is something to say about having an incredibly stressful day at work, and basically just, even if you wanted as hard as you could not to show the stress, it's just going to be in your eyes. It's going to be on your face.
Well, I enjoyed this topic, Daniel.
Well, I enjoyed
for
speaking
always
with
being
you.
open to go wherever my brain has been.
No, I think it's important. But I think, actually, that's an interesting word, because I think we talk about transparency when really we want openness. And I think openness and transparency are not the same. Like, yeah, we want openness, but openness is going with the flow, going with the idea, seeing where we end up, open to where the dialogue unfolds. In a way, transparency seems open, but actually it's not. It's not open to non-transparency. It's not open to veiling. Like, transparency is actually, it's funny you just said that word, because transparency is actually not very open. Like, it moralizes itself. If you're not transparent, you're bad. There's a certain so it's kind of interesting, because transparency seems like a simile for openness, but it actually isn't necessarily the same as openness. In my experience, transparent people can often be not very open at all.
Yeah, and it makes me think of, like, just some glass globe or some glass wall. Like, there's no way that you can open that without it shattering.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's...
What it means to say is, like, it's not... It appears quite open, but you can't get through that.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. But often, too, like, unfortunately, I think transparent people, they don't realize it. Often it kind of is surveillance to make sure you're not doing what you're not supposed to do. And so transparency seems like openness, but actually it's also checking in.
Well, that works with the glass analogy too. With exactly. Let's always be able to see what surveillance basically. Let's just be able to see what you're always doing, or so that you can kind of check in on the other person.
Yeah, I think people can hide what transparency is actually doing by conflating it with openness. But really, for me, openness is only true openness is going with the flow, improvisation, not having an agenda. The choice between transparency and hiding the sublation is unveiling with the UN in parentheses. That people are just caught fluctuating between transparency or hiding.
Well, I also don't think that transparency as an ethic actually helps you achieve what you would like or what you're hoping for. In like, what I mean,
because if you talk to that person, they're going to expect you to say everything. So then people will actually avoid one another. They'll actually hide from one another.
Well, that's the thing. I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you're like, we should be transparent. Okay, like, let's just say we should be transparent with each other. You're not being transparent because you're hiding this thing. Okay, so then you're like, what to say to the person, you're hiding this, you shouldn't. We should be transparent. That doesn't usually get the person to want to be transparent.
No,
like,
not at all.
Because, again, there's that surveillance aspect of it, and you're also kind of... It's interesting, because somebody hiding something is actually very telling.
Yes.
In terms of the information you can gain from that, it's very telling about... Well, it should be something that you say, wait a second, I wonder why they might be doing that in the first place.
Yes.
I wonder what's kind of going on here.
Yes.
And the push for transparency, I understand it. Like, I can understand where that's coming from. But I don't know that it equips us for the openness, for the being kind of open doors to each other, to be able to actually enter into the otherness of that person's experience, and to be able to, for them to share and pour out.
The emphasis should be on telling the truth. You should always tell the truth. And when people say transparent, they're meaning tell the truth, right? But then...
That's the thing. It's conflated.
It's conflated. So, you should tell the truth. But here's the problem. It is literally impossible to tell another human being literally everything. So if your ethic is transparent, it necessarily means there will always be something that people can be accused of not being transparent about. And thus, the relationship will be very fragile. It'll be fraught with mistrust, because your standard is impossible. No one... Because a lot of times it's like, why did you hide that from me? I didn't think about it. You're like, it wasn't that I was hiding it. It was just that it didn't come up. But the person can say, well, it should have. So to emphasize transparency sets you up for trouble. It's just not a useful concept. Because, you should tell the truth. Yes, you should confess. Yes, you should work to unveil. You should work through a process. Yes, you should know what you need to know. But you should also trust. In what situation does the word transparency prove useful? As a distinct term? Not really. Because honestly, when people know that transparency is a demand, they perform more. They become more performative.
And they usually hide more.
Yes.
Because they don't... I don't know. I mean, maybe that's not necessarily
because they know they're under surveillance.
That's the thing. I think that's where it can happen, where that dynamic can happen.
It's an irony. When you want people to be transparent, they're more scared.
So if you feel like you're being watched through a glass dome or something all the time, you may resort to hiding as what you feel is your only resort to do the internal processing, right? Or to do the solitude work, which
so you can handle that transparency.